Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, and especially going by the 3 H's of the channel, happy, healthy, and hydrated. And in this video, I have some pretty crazy and bizarre encounters. In no particular order, I have some scary happenings from Alaska, a viewer story from the Cascade Mountains, one where a guy just wants to go to a farmhouse and explore, and has some weird stuff happen to him. There's some missing time involving some campers, and a guy tries to take on a Bigfoot. There's also a couple more, but if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. I had this really weird thing happen to me when I was 12 or so, when I was in Boy Scouts. Me and my dad were going camping, but it wasn't with the rest of my troop. If I remember right, we were trying to get some kind of badge. There was also another kid that was in my troop that was going with us as well. We were friends at the time, and I think that he was trying to get the badge as well. And by friends, I mean that we would hang out while at Scouts, not in real life, not outside of that. So, we get to the campsite and we set up. Maybe an hour or so before sundown, a group of scouts comes out of the woods and into the camp and asks me and the other kid if we want to go see a house in the woods. We agree, and I don't even think that I told my dad where we were going. I follow the scouts through the woods. We don't follow any trails or anything. We just go through the brush. We arrive at this big 2-story concrete house that's deep in the woods. Inside, there's an old stove and a rusted bed frame. We poke around. I don't remember talking to the scouts at all. I remember wanting to go upstairs, but for some reason, I was too scared. It's getting really dark, and I say it's time to go. We go back through the woods again. Again, no trail. We arrive back at the camp. The scouts are gone. We don't see them tomorrow. Some things that really freak me out were that in the house, there seems to be a blank in my memory. It was daytime when we went to the house, and then all of a sudden it's night and we're leaving. I have no memory of what happened inside that house. And not only that, my dad says as well that there seems to be some blank for him too. He was sitting at the camp, and then all of a sudden we come back and it's night. None of us have any real clue as to what the hell happened out there. This happened when I was still living with my parents. I lived in a quiet part of town near these huge fields in England. It was about 11 at night and I couldn't sleep. I go over to my window and I open it to have a look outside because that's what people do when they're just bored. So I'm looking up and down the street, and when I look right, I notice something. On the very top of the phone cable pole thing is this black humanoid thing. It looked hairy, and I'm not making it up when I say that it had red eyes, but not glowing red eyes. They just glinted that way. I always was interested in that kind of stuff, like aliens and cryptids and the supernatural. I just looked at it. I was staring at it, and it was looking right back at me. And that's when it basically shimmied down the pole and sprinted off into the fields. It's weird, it seemed to change its height at will. When it was on top of the pole, it was maybe only a meter tall, but once it shimmied down the pole and sprinted off into the field, it was well over 2 meters tall. The next morning, I went out to look at the pole, and there was nothing that was different, nor was there any real way that a person could get up there. It's just a weird memory that I have from when I was living there. I worked as a deputy in a rural Georgia county. I have been on a call which some old lady lived alone in a cabin called us because some big person was knocking on her doors and banging on the walls and howling. I was the nearest squad car by the scene. Now, what I was expecting to find was some local drunk to have wandered onto her property. So I got out of the car and I smelled a faint odor, and I walked to her door and knocked. I knocked on the door and declared that I was with the sheriff department and started to hear knocking from the woods. I unholstered my duty weapon and she opened the door. She let me in and we talked. She told me that she didn't want to press charges against the guy. I walked out and proceeded to walk toward the last sighting of where she saw this man. I unholstered my pistol and turned on my flashlight, and what I saw was a huge man in the woodline. I asked him to put his hands on his head and come out slowly. I noticed that this man was taller than me, and I'm about 6'3". As I got closer, it had to be 8 feet tall. I proceeded to back away slowly, and it came closer, and I fired my weapon upon it after warning it. It did nothing. It was only a 9mm. I fired again, and I saw some blood and heard a blood-curdling roar come from the creature. And the next thing I know, I'm calling for backup and firing my weapon toward the creature while listening to this blood-curdling scream. Then, I felt a limb make contact with my face, and everything goes black. I woke up to 2 deputies carrying me to a squad car, and them screaming, "Officer down, officer down." Needless to say, I told them I was at the woodline, and someone snuck up on me. I didn't tell them what I actually saw, but the old lady told a much different story. She talked about the big hairy man that was harassing her, and they believed her, but the official story is that someone snuck up on me and left me there. Way back when I was a kid, we had this abandoned farmhouse that was outside my neighborhood and into the woods. I decided that I wanted to check it out, especially at dusk, for that spook factor. After I had left the neighborhood and was into the woods, I met up with 2 friends who were already out there. I thought it was kind of weird that they were out there, but they said they had the same intention. They're pretty quiet on the walk there, but I figured that we were all just a little bit spooked. We eventually get to the place, and right in the front door there was this small brass angel candle extinguisher type thing. One of my friends said that its eyes were glowing green, but I couldn't see anything. We find some really creepy stairs that are in the house, and we go up them. There's just piles of hay and stuff everywhere. There's blood smeared on the walls and in the hay. And suddenly, I hear a door slam downstairs. I turn around to leave. My friends are gone. I thought they were playing a prank on me. I turned around, ran down the stairs, and back out the front door. But they were nowhere to be found. There's no way they could have got this far in just a few seconds. Especially with them, if they were gonna play a prank, they probably would have scared me at the bottom of the stairs as well. But they were nowhere to be found. Anywhere. Not through the woods. Not through the neighborhoods. When I walked past their houses, their parents weren't even home. I asked my friends the next day at school, "What the hell? Where did you guys go?" They told me that they weren't even home the other night, and they convinced me with new trading cards that they got. Judging by this and the fact that when I even went by their houses that their parents weren't home, and all the lights were out in their house, Who the hell was I with in the woods? Especially, what's weird to me is how I met them already in the woods, and I hadn't told them before that I was going to this creepy farmhouse. So, the whole situation is just weird. This story is one that was shared with me by a friend who was and is a professional ski patroller, paramedic, and general backcountry badass, and generally all around honest and decent guy. So around late February or early March in the late 1990s, a good and trustworthy friend told me the only paranormal event that I actually believe without personal experience. I was living in a small ski resort in the Cascade Mountains. I was a ski instructor, and I spent each winter living in a lodge on the mountain with several other friends. One who was a member of a professional ski patrol who did a lot of research and rescue work when people got lost in the backcountry outside the resort. This is the story he told me, and I believe it. At that time, a backcountry skier went missing after they left the boundaries of the resort's normal trails. This was in an area that was popular for expert skiers who liked to trek out of bounds in search of more challenging terrain and fresh snow. The particular skier was experienced and familiar with the area, but he was also young and reckless, and he didn't return by the evening as he usually did. So early in the morning, the ski patrol started a search. Other backcountry skiers and snowboarders joined the search as well. The lost skier had followed a popular track away from the area on a path where all of the exits led back to the ski resort proper, but he did not return. For 3 days, many people, including volunteers, tracking dogs, rangers on snowmobiles, and even helicopters, searched for the lost hiker. But the only things that were found were some faint tracks because it had been snowing at the time of his disappearance. The tracks were inevitably hard to follow. Eventually, the search was ended. Nobody was likely to survive in the backcountry with only enough supplies for a day trip. It was assumed that he had died of hypothermia. Here's where my friend comes in. He and another very experienced patroller decided to take one last shot and try to follow the faint tracks to their end. They found the tracks and followed them up the mountain past a frozen pond and stream. The pond was called Lost Lake, and past there, the trail turned and led over a high saddle, a pass, in the farthest part of that valley, and led into another valley that led directly away from the resort. Luckily, after a day and a half, they actually found the lost skier. He was almost frozen and out of food and water, but alive. Unfortunately, his hands and feet were badly frozen. As a result, he had to have both of his feet and some fingers amputated. But here's where the story gets strange. The pond that the skier had walked by or used was and is a no-kidding Native American sacred site. It's a place rarely visited except in the summer by members of that First Nations, and more rarely by everyone else. Even then, it's supposed to be treated with the most respect and deference. I would think that it probably isn't supposed to be approached at all, except for members of the tribe whose sacred site that it belongs to, but it's also near a modern trail somewhat. When the lost hiker was found by my friend and his partner, the skier has said that in his extremity of pain and fear, he was followed by a Native American in traditional dress. This native didn't like him being there and told him to give up, to lie down in the snow, that he was hopelessly lost. But the skier kept on until he was eventually found and saved by my friend, and the other ski patroller, who had to call in a helicopter to extract the guy since he clearly couldn't walk anymore. Of course, they thought that this spirit was just a delusion of pain and possibly brought on by the hypothermia and exhaustion, and he didn't believe it. But when my friend and the other researcher couldn't fit in the helicopter, they had to return the way that they came, which was no big deal for them. They were very experienced mountain men. And then, when they passed by the lost lake, they had the time to take a good look at the tracks. They saw now that there were not only the lost skier's tracks and their own, there was another set of tracks parallel to the tracks of the lost skier, barefoot tracks. The extra tracks started near the pond and ended shortly past it, in the exact location where the lost skier had claimed to have the man walking next to him on the trail. The spirit was very angry with him being there, told him to give up, to lie down, and to die in the frozen mountains. This was obviously disturbing. My friend said that he would never return to this lost lake in the winter again. As far as I know, he never has. I too have hiked this lake pond, but not since then. It's a very beautiful place, but after I heard the story from my friend, well, it takes on a whole new meaning. And that was sent in to me by Brian. So Brian, I hope I could do your story justice, and I hope I told it well. I've lived in Alaska my whole life, and I've seen some stuff that just shouldn't have been there. My stepdad has a house and a cabin that's on 6 acres of backwoods up by the mountains. My sisters and I would live in the cabin while the rest of my family lives in the house. One night, we hear a really loud grumbling and pacing all around the cabin at 2 a.m. It woke us all up out of a dead sleep. My very first thought was, oh crap, there's a bear outside. Everybody be quiet. I didn't hear my dogs, and we had 5 of them, big mastiffs. I hear it move to the porch, and it starts growling and scratching at the old wood. We were talking really deep growling, not a grunting noise. Now, bears are also one of a fear of mine, especially Alaskan bears, and this bear sounded really big. But then we hear howling off in the woods behind my house. Not a regular howl, it was very shrill and sharp, followed by a long droning sound. I thought then maybe it's not bears, it could be wolves, but I haven't heard of them being in this area so close to people. Being the oldest, I've always had to be the bravest, so I get up out of bed and I move the curtain a fraction of an inch from the window to see the front door and the porch. My heart's pounding because I can still hear the scratching and groaning. I'm terrified that whatever it is going to see me. The sound stops immediately as I pull the curtain away. There's nothing there. There's no scratches in the wood. Nothing on my porch. I pull the curtain back down and I get into bed. The sound starts up again, and we sit there in the pitch black cabin while this goes on all night. Scratching, splitting wood, growling, all night long. We're too scared to do anything, and this was before cell phones, or before everybody had them anyways, so calling for my stepdad wasn't an option. If I'm honest, I've always had a gut fear of being on that property. Everyone in my family has some weird story about the place. This is one my stepdad told me happened to him a few years ago before he met my mom. He always was into the paranormal, like aliens, shamanism, and all that stuff. So one night, he was outside having a beer by the fire with a few friends. He started seeing strange lights in the sky. down toward one of the back roads. This road was a dirt road that turned into a really long, overgrown, forgotten path. So he grabs this old-ass VHS camera and he heads up there with his friends. They get closer to the lights. 2 or 3 of them are moving in the sky. He aims the camera at them and he films them for a long time while they move around the sky. The lights vanish. He goes home to watch the video with his friends, and there's nothing but static. But it's weird. Every time he turned his camera away from the lights and toward his friends, it came in fine. But then when he would turn his camera back to the sky to view the lights, it would turn to static again. We always found that just really weird. And a few times, I've seen things looking into my windows at night. And one time, something actually got into my closet and another under my bed, but those are stories for a different time. This one particular time, I was out in the woods riding my horse through the path through these dense trees. To this very day, I don't even know why there was a path back there or even where it led to. I was always too scared to follow it completely. So I come across this small fallen log that's across the trail. The horse stops dead, absolutely refuses to walk over it. I get off the horse and I move the log. As soon as I throw it off into the woods, my horse freaks out and bolts back to my house, leaving me about half a mile in the woods by myself. I call the horse an asshole and I start the trek back home. As I'm walking, I start feeling uneasy, really uneasy, like I'm being watched. The forest is nice though. There's moss that makes everything look like the whole thing belongs in a fairy tale movie. But this fear is really starting to get to me. I kind of start to panic. I suddenly don't want to look behind me or to the side of me. Just keep my vision firmly on the path, straight down. I end up running through the woods, and at this point, I have to look up. I ignore everything around me. I'm just sprinting down this trail. I get to this small cliff that, when not on a horse, if you climb it, it's a very quick shortcut back to my house. So, I climb it in record time. I reach the top. I finally feel safe enough to turn around and look. I see many dark figures moving behind the trees as soon as I look. Like long, spindly things, some short, some tall. It's the tall ones that scare me the most. I could feel the evil radiating off of them. I turn around and I sprint the rest of the way home, knowing on some level that these things don't really like to come near the house. I get back home to my mom. She was scared because my stupid horse came back with no rider. I tell her everything that happened to me. She sighs and goes on to tell me about the man who owned the property before. He was a shaman, and at the end of his life he kind of went insane, and he opened a portal in the back of the property. He also jumped off the roof of his house and broke his leg because he thought he could fly, but ever since he opened the portal, weird things have been happening in those woods. And in retrospect, I have to wonder if whatever creature was on my porch at night, even though I couldn't see it, I still wonder if it was hiding underneath the porch, just waiting for someone to step outside. I probably will go back to this property some summer, just to find out and see where the path leads, but I'll be bringing friends and dogs and guns and all that stuff. The place has been a huge mystery throughout my childhood, so once I eventually get my shit together, I'm going to go back there. So, what'd you think of those encounters? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you want to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon down there as well. And one story that someone told me recently from the general area of where I live. I won't say the name of this road, but it's a dirt road and it's popular for truckers and stuff. It's like an alternate route so that they don't have to deal with traffic and all that. So this particular time it was night, and I don't know what time of year it was. It might have been summer or fall, but they were coming back from the city, and since they had a four-wheel drive, they decided to take that way. Just more fun in some way, I guess. Anyways, as they're driving, they see something off the side of the road. It looks like a wolf, but wolves are not exactly officially in my province. It's the same as mountain lions. People have seen them, but no one's really got it on camera, if you know what I mean. So anyways, they slowed down, thinking, oh my god, it's a wolf. I haven't seen one of those and stuff like that. But then it's not a wolf, and it stands up, and it jumps on their hood, and it has these piercing eyes. It's like they had tinted windows, and it's like it didn't even matter. They could see straight through it. They were looking straight at the two of them, growled at them, and then jumped off their hood. Now this vehicle, I believe, was an older Ford Explorer that had a lift kit on it. And if you didn't guess already, this story took place back in the early 2000s when that was a popular thing to do. Now again, I know where this place is, and I've thought about going there at night, but I don't know the condition of the road, especially now. But I thought of going there at night and live streaming it if I have cell service, and that would be a cool thing to do, I guess. But even if I can't, I can still tell you the story, and I thought it was pretty crazy that something like that happened. And they said that when it stood up, it was almost humanoid, which kind of goes with other stories from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s of a similar thing happening in the area. It's pretty wild. You never know what's really out there, and you never know what you're going to encounter. Most people don't encounter anything at all, but every now and then, something weird seems to happen. But with that, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching.